Welcome back to Plebs on Parade, the show where every pleb is a potential philosopher. I'm your host, Timmy Tether, and today we're talking to plebs about regulatory clarity. Is it good? Is it bad? What do plebs think? Let's find out. It's Timmy Tether again here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We're talking to Carrie from Waco, Texas. Carrie, do you think we have enough regulatory clarity at the moment? How is the current state of regulatory clarity impacting you in Waco, Texas?
Well, I've been faithfully stacking sats in order to be able to afford taxes while my husband gambles away his savings trading African Solana meme coins. I was looking forward to serving him divorce papers this year, but due to lack of regulatory clarity regarding taxes and the strategic Bitcoin reserve, I'm stuck in limbo. If the government sets policy requiring me to use my husband's Bitcoin node, I can't afford a divorce. I can always use Monero, but as someone who is raised in a strong Christian household, I don't want to resort to that. I've never met a hot chick who uses Monero.
That was Carrie from Texas. Carrie is waiting for regulatory clarity before leaving her husband so she doesn't have to use Monero. Next is Henry from Beaverton, Oregon. Henry, what's clear, what isn't when it comes to the regulatory environment?
Timmy Tether. Thanks for having me on Plebs on Parade. I'm a captain in the U.S. Air Force, and I'm actually thankful for regulatory clarity regarding gender. As a pilot instructor, my trans students have almost got me killed more times than I can count. Knowing my life is safer and my daughter isn't playing battle shits in the women's restroom with a mature adult man who will destroy her in an unfair game of battle shits and crush, her self-confidence makes me very glad I voted for Trump.
Thank you for your service, Henry. I wouldn't have the freedom to host Plebs on Parade without your sacrifice. Henry has a glass-half-full perspective. He's happy his daughter won't be playing battle shits with dudes in the bathrooms. Our last pleb is Ranjit from Manitoba in Canada. Ranjit, what's the regulatory clarity situation up there in the Queen's Territory?
Right now, I am very worried, Timmy Tether. I am scared that the United States will convert my country into the 51st state. I buy Bitcoin from Bull Bitcoin, but Bull Bitcoin is not available to Americans. Also, I am not sure how to afford taxes in America. So for right now, I must wait. Listen to Bitcoin podcasts and wait for regulatory clarity.
Ranjit, you sound much different than I expected when I saw you were from Canada. Anyway, Bitcoin podcasts and low time preference, that's the pleb way. That's all for this week, folks. I'm your host, Timmy Tether. Thanks for watching Plebs on Parade.
Welcome to this edition of the Bugle Weekly. This is Richard Greaser. Joining me today, as usual, is Rod Palmer. I just want to address a few things. So, we missed our last episode of Behind the Podcast. It's not going away. We're just busy. And sometimes the stars don't align. So don't worry. We'll have more interviews coming your direction soon. We're actually working on some big things. I'm not going to share. This is an announcement of an announcement, but I think we're going to have some very, very high profile interviews coming your way here pretty soon that are going to blow your mind. They're going to blow your socks off. So have a new pair of socks because your socks are going to get blown off and they might go floating away in the wind and you might need a new pair of socks to put on your feet. So stay prepped for that. But today's episode is going to be a little bit shorter. I'm strapped for time. I've got a deadline on something else that I got to get to. So a little bit shorter, but the world is crazy right now. How you doing today, Rod?
Yeah. One of the issues, first of all, I'm doing great. I'm always doing great because Bitcoin has already won. But one of the big issues right now, part of the reason why we missed a cherished episode of Behind the Podcast, part of the reason that the bull market is not as hot as many of us expect. Many of us expected that by President's Day, we would be celebrating President Trump for pumping Bitcoin to $1 million. However, a lot of people, including ourselves, even though we have probably been the most accurate at forecasting the political events that have taken place over the past few months, none of us really, I think, respected and appreciated the amount of proof of work that Donald Trump and Elon Musk and his broccoli haircutted, autistic 10X teenagers we're going to put into making America a better country. However, there's trade-offs that come with so much proof of work, so much, just focus locked in activity. And that is that right now, everybody is just desperately seeking regulatory clarity. If you are hosting a podcast with somebody who does not live in the same country as you, will there be tariffs on your phone bills? We don't know. If you are sending hash to a mining pool outside your country's jurisdiction and tax, area of influence, will you be able to continue that in the future? We don't know. If you're a Canadian, will you have to change your logo on your podcast to an American flag because you have become the 51st state of the United States? We don't know. And I can keep going on. But right now, everybody is eager and willing to comply. Not everybody, but there is, obviously, we know, a cohort of people who are always going to exercise their God-given right to be compliant. And they want to be compliant, but nobody knows what it means to be compliant right now or what it will mean to be compliant next week. And so that is right now what is kind of hurting not only the Bitcoin price, but, podcasters' ability to create good signal, great content without having to worry about all these other extraneous issues.
Yeah. The lines of how to comply have been very blurry. And what makes it more difficult to determine what to do or what to think as an individual is the entire world of journalism has been turned upside down. All these journalists, with the shuttering of USAID, are scrambling. They've lost their income. They're unemployed. They're trying to figure out if they should learn to podcast or if they're going to get alternate funding from the Deep State 2.0, if they're going to launch meme coins, if they're going to have to sell feet pics, good, honest work, or is Tether going to be paying them in the future? Are they going to be on Rumble earning Tether? Where is their future funding going to come from? And that's one of the things that I think sets us aside or apart, is that we get our funding from you. We don't get our funding from USAID. We don't get it from Tether. We get it from you. We don't work for the CIA. And so, we've been saying it for a while that there's trade-offs to working with the CIA. And one of the trade-offs is that you have to be gay. It just makes you gay. But one of the other trade-offs is that you can't rely on the CIA. They're an unreliable organization. They don't read Ayn Rand. They don't smoke cigarettes. They're a bunch of fucking losers. So, if you're a journalist, if you're a podcaster, and you're working with the CIA, you're building a house on sand. And we've been warned not to build a house.
Yeah, ironically, relying on intelligence agencies is not an intelligent strategy. And like I said, we don't know what it means to be compliant anymore. We don't know what the government thinks compliance means anymore. But to really, I think, boil it down to the essence of what everyday Americans and future foreign taxpayers are thinking right now, and especially in journalism, especially in federal agencies, is not only how am I going to be able to afford my taxes, will I have to be able to afford my taxes? So when you think about who's going to invest in a new company, if a state like, Oklahoma or any of the states is going to purchase Bitcoin for a strategic Bitcoin reserve, well, if a sovereign wealth fund is going to buy the Bitcoin ETF, they do want to do that. and they're pushing for it. But right now, the amount is up in the air because they don't know if they can afford their taxes or if they're going to be able to afford their taxes next year. And, think about Canada right now. The regulatory clarity there's a lot of problems in Canada right now, but the biggest one's regulatory clarity. They have a tax system and they don't know if they can afford their taxes. They don't know if they're going to be able to afford American taxes. And then as an entire country, if they become the 51st state, Dennis Porter is going to be landing in Ottawa that day to start talking to legislators about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, because Dennis is trying to get all American states to have their own strategic Bitcoin reserve. I don't think that the average Canadian is ready for the kind of aggressive orange pilling behavior that Dennis Porter is going to bring to them. They're very polite, and Dennis Porter is going to just overpower them. And a lot of men in Canada are going to aggressively respond to Dennis Porter orange pilling their wives and girlfriends, mothers and daughters. It's very difficult to plan your life right now for all these reasons.
So I noticed on the topic of Dennis Porter, I noticed that a few of his Bitcoin bills have failed recently. And I wonder if it's because he's distracted. His resources are being divided as he's looking at how is he going to orange pill Canada? How is he going to orange pill Greenland? These soon to be U.S. provinces or states or territories. His surface area is expanding.
He's tweeted about this recently. Him and his one of his interns or assistants that's working with him at Satoshi Action Fund, they tweeted about this, that due to all of his bullish announcements that he had been tweeting in the month of December and the month of January, local state congressmen, state senators have been scrambling to have Dennis and Satoshi Action Fund help them write the Bitcoin strategic reserve bill for their state.
Yep.
Most of these, like if somebody's a state legislator or a state congressman, they're probably a lot more retarded than the average federal politician or governor. They don't have access to, ask ChatGPT to write them a legislative bill that is, interoperable with the state laws that they live in. They rely on Dennis Porter. So Dennis Porter right now is trying to get these bills up and going through committee to a vote in 50 states. So he's got to travel all over the country. Now he's got to think about Greenland. He's got to think about Canada. He's got to think about Panama. He's got to think about multiple other places, potentially even Europe. This is, he just doesn't have enough funding. He doesn't have enough, his time is just spread too thin.
Yep.
And in this absence, like I said, of regulatory clarity, Dennis has to prepare for all eventualities. And if anybody's capable of it, it's him. But we're seeing the limitations of an individual's ability to orange pill when the world is actually open to it and kind of demanding that orange pilling. This is why, this is why 40 hours of Bitcoin podcast per week is so important. It takes the responsibility off of Dennis's shoulders and puts it on Bitcoin podcasters, his natural orange pilling allies.
Welcome to Bugle News Headlines. Here's your headlines for the week. Trump states that he will be appointing Whistling Diesel as governor of Canada. Jack Dorsey is using proceeds from his sale of Twitter to fund gain-of-function research on Nostr users. The Gold Conference will be held at Fort Knox this year from June 28th through 30th. Scientists find that rats were found to pay taxes in nature, even if taxes were not imposed on them. Panic is happening in D.C. as podcasters funded by USAID scramble to find funding for their podcasts. Google searches for Fountain, Value for Value, PodConf sponsorships, Tether, 40HPW, and Lightning wallets explode. These are your Bugle headlines. Now enjoy the rest of the show.
In no way is this like failures on Dennis's part. I wouldn't call it that. It's just that there's these temporary setbacks. You know, when you're an individual like Dennis, an individual that makes the world go round, one of the real builders, one of the real innovators and visionaries, sometimes you just face setbacks. And what he's doing is he's putting his head down. He's not getting worried. He's still out there orange pilling. He's still out there curing erectile dysfunction. He's still moving. So don't count him out at all. That's a big mistake.
This is not on Dennis Porter. If anybody, it is on the Bitcoin community, especially those who have the protocol knowledge. They have the Bitcoin podcast knowledge, but they choose right now to be doomers and to shill Monero or some other crypto because they think that Bitcoin development, privacy, peer-to-peer use, node running is not moving as quickly as their time. They need to lower their time preference and realize that Bitcoin has already won and that it is a slow evolution that affects, every aspect of society. It's very difficult when you're living through it to notice the changes. Mm-hmm. And so instead of like Vlad Kostia, saying that Paul Stork and Drive Chains is the only thing that can save Bitcoin, or Shinobi and the Covenants people kind of throwing everything, all their orange billing efforts, throwing it out and leaving it all to Dennis Porter and Bitcoin podcasters because they're salty that nobody wants to activate their scaling solution, even though the mempool is empty. Well, listen, you need to be out there with Dennis Porter, having people realize that they can pay their taxes on Bitcoin. The mempool would not be empty if people were paying their taxes on Bitcoin. If they were boosting podcasts, if they were relying on US aid to be able to afford taxes that they could pay in Bitcoin to the government, people would be paying using on-chain payment. You're putting the cart before the horse. If the mempool is empty, we need to get people onboarded. Then we worry about scaling later. Dennis Porter seems to be the only person who has his priorities in order right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead.
I think all the criticism, or at least a lot of the criticism, should be levied at David Bailey. And I think that's for multiple reasons. So if you look at David Bailey, he's somebody that is putting roadblocks in Dennis Porter's way, right? His priorities are all whack. He supported the president, and we didn't get NGU from that. There was zero NGU from that. He's been blackballing Dennis from speaking at the conference, which is really important. People need to hear from Dennis at the biggest stage in Bitcoin. He's covertly supporting Donald Trump's meme coin, which is getting away from this Bitcoin only agenda. He's just doing a really bad job of ushering in NGU.
Right. David Bailey, due to personal beefs and, I suspect a little bit of jealousy because Dennis Porter has been orange pilling far more people and competing. David Bailey's been promising this federal strategic Bitcoin reserve. He's been unable to deliver it in the time frame that he promised. So Dennis Porter is trying to basically front run the Federal Reserve by creating these state reserves. But Dennis could be doing both. And if Dennis was involved in this federal, there wouldn't be XRP, Ripple, shills in Washington, D.C. Dennis Porter would have ran them out. There wouldn't have been, we were going to get into this, the meme coin launch in Argentina that rugged a lot of people, including Barstool's Dave Portnoy, for millions of dollars. This wouldn't have happened. This tragedy would not have occurred if Dennis Porter had not, if they weren't just, the 9/11 Commission determined that one of the causes of the 9/11 terrorist attacks was a lack of cooperation and almost like a malicious undercut, like they were trying to undercut each other, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, instead of working together to entrap young, horny Muslim men with an affinity for violence. They were competing with each other to get funding from U.S. aid to try to turn those young men into gay retards.
Totally.
And as a result, we had the worst terrorist attack on American soil in history. And I'm not saying that we are approaching or at risk of another 9/11, because David Bailey and Dennis Porter have this beef that David just cannot put away. But it's not just David. You look at Swan. Swan just posted recently last week that they have the most YouTube views of all the other. They have more than Simply Bitcoin, more than Matthew Crater, more than Preston Pish, more than, they listed several others. But they don't platform Dennis Porter. They do maybe once in a while. If you have that many viewers on a regular basis, you want to put Dennis Porter in front of that camera as often as possible. And they're not doing it either because it would steal their thunder. And I don't know. Like I said, I'm not saying that another 9/11 is going to come of this, but I can't say that it won't. And if you can't say with 100% certainty that we're not going to have another 9/11 if David Bailey and Dennis Porter don't get along, I think that's enough of a motivation for them to try to come together, break bread, and discuss things peer to peer as Satoshi would have wanted them.
100%. I mean, if you have a platform, it's your responsibility to platform Dennis Porter, because what's good for Dennis Porter is good for Bitcoin, and what's bad for Dennis Porter is bad for Bitcoin. It's just an undeniable reality. Swan has really been dropping the ball there. Bitcoin Magazine has been really dropping the ball there. We've been offering...
Who hasn't been dropping the ball? Who has not been dropping the ball is Simply Bitcoin. They have partnered when Dennis Porter is not traveling and, mentoring state politicians. He's with Nico, with Opti, with those guys, and they're platforming him. Mm-hmm. And that's good. But we need more. The Bitcoin space needs more Dennis Porter, or Simply Bitcoin, less David Bailey, less meme coins.
Less Corey.
And speaking of meme coins, and speaking of meme coins, that was a big news event, and we just kind of mentioned it. So Argentina's libertarian Bitcoin president, he, as a result, most likely, of not having enough access to people like Dennis Porter, whether personally or just through, if Javier Milei is going on YouTube and looking for Bitcoin content, he's not seeing Dennis Porter because David Bailey and Swan are out platforming Dennis Porter.
Yep.
So what is the result? He gets fooled by some influencer to launch this meme coin called Libra. And he tweets about it and he says that it's, he's encouraging people to participate. And within 24 hours, the meme coin gets to a $60 billion market cap, which is bigger than I think any of the major banks in Argentina. And then as soon as it hits that point, Barstool's Dave Portnoy piles in. Fred Krueger was probably in there. They become the exit liquidity. And it's just another rug. And it's not just the CIA who is rugging and pump and dumping meme coins in the global south to create taxpayers and Tether users. It is now their proxy leaders. So, Javier Milei, he is a proxy leader for the CIA. But the CIA is now looking for regulatory clarity. They're distracted pumping, dumping meme coins in Africa. So how does Javier Milei, he's not getting his paychecks anymore from U.S. aid. So he has to create his own income to be able to afford taxes. And he's relying on meme coins instead of Bitcoin because he just doesn't have that education, that knowledge that Dennis Porter would have been able to prevent some of this, fraud.
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic case of sending the wrong troops to battle, right? Different troops have different specialties, and they might be good troops, but put in the wrong situations, they're going to fail. You can't set up your troops for fail. And the reality is, if you send individuals like Samson Mao down to Argentina, to Orange Pill, they're just, he didn't have, while he was a good orange pillar, he did not have the resources necessary to finish the job. And Dennis Porter would have been much better equipped to do that. And I think whoever the individuals that made the decisions to send individuals like Samson Mao need to be held accountable. And it's really disappointing what's happening with PodConf right now, because we should be having NGU. And we've warned our audience that NGU doesn't primarily come from compliance. It comes from Bitcoin podcasts. And there just hasn't been enough emphasis on this. And it's because these PodConf influencers are insecure. They don't want individuals stealing their market share. Corey's all worried about his YouTube channel. He's all worried about the optics of his own personal thing. And he's forgetting there's a bigger picture here, that we need more podcasters.
Yeah.
We need more full-time podcast listeners. And it's not all about him. That's the thing.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, these people don't realize is it's not all about them. And that's why we need to rely on Dennis Porter, because he is one of the most selfless individuals in the world. He's like the Mother Teresa of Bitcoin.
Yeah. And this goes back to the failure of Bitcoiners and Bitcoin podcast listeners. Well, not Bitcoin podcast listeners so much, but they're part of it. Is if you're listening to 40 hours per week, if you are using your node and you are reading the white paper once a week, like you should be, you would remember, you would be hard pressed to forget the Byzantine generals problem that Satoshi solved to create Bitcoin. And a lot of people have a lot of different ways that they like to explain it. It's great for YouTube videos and things like that. But at the end of the day, what the Byzantine generals problem is a way of solving and decentralizing regulatory clarity. Because if you don't have regulatory clarity as a 5-star field marshal about the ability, if you have the right troops in the right locations, if they're going to be successful in their attack, if you don't have that clarity, you can't wage the necessary crusade or war that is required to defeat the evils of fiat and the powers of fiat. And part of this, a lot of people give Corey at Swan this pass. They think that because he got rugged by Tether, that, he's got to lick his wounds and stay out of the limelight and stop preaching. And he's got to deal with his lawsuits. And they're going to do proof of lawsuits, and that they're going to shore that up. But there's a whole lot of mess to deal with. But part of this is that last summer, Corey said that he wanted to use the US dollar to make Bitcoin stronger. And people mocked him. They laughed at him. They told him it was stupid. Because we thought that they were doing that because they wanted to separate money from state. It turns out that what they really wanted was to use Bitcoin to make the dollar stronger. And Corey said, well, listen, if you guys want to make the dollar stronger instead of Bitcoin, I'm going to step back and just dominate YouTube. And apparently not platform Dennis Porter. So all of our priorities and our incentives are out of whack right now. We're trying to strengthen the dollar with Bitcoin instead of the other way around. And we're not remembering that You have to be the sovereign user, peer-to-peer, use the node, understand the Byzantine generals problem, understand decentralization and, censorship resistance. If you don't focus on the fundamentals, you're going to get sloppy in your execution. And we're getting sloppy in our execution. We have let the meme coiners, the shit coiners, we've let them just run wild. We have not supported Predator and Corey and some of the Bitcoin maximalists on Twitter to keep that under control. We've let David Bailey introduce shitcoining and meme coins to the Oval Office, to Buenos Aires, even now, look at El Salvador. El Salvador has abandoned Bitcoin for Tether, for the IMF, when the only reason this country went from the poorest, most corrupt river capital of the world to one of the most successful countries, most peaceful, most prosperous, safest countries in the world, with just a little bit of regulatory clarity, Max Kaiser, Jack Mallers, and some Bitcoin podcasters. That's all it took.
Yep.
You don't have to get cute with it. You just have to remember the fundamentals and embody that spirit of Dennis Porter.
We need to support our Bitcoin social justice warriors, because at the end of the day, they're one of our biggest assets. And I know the term social justice warrior has a negative connotation because of the
USAID made it that way.
Yeah, USAID made it that way. But now that USAID's out of the picture, we have a whole new breed of SJWs in Bitcoin. Predator, Corey, all these individuals.
Think about it. A warrior used to mean a respected veteran, a troop, somebody like Shane Hazel, or Alex Stanczyk, or Mike Hobart, or some of these other veterans, these people who went and they faced evil and they combated it for American freedom, for U.S. dollar supremacy, which was important before Bitcoin. But the USAID and the CIA, once they made it so that, non-binary pregnant men could serve in the military, the term warrior people lost all respect for it. People don't respect veterans anymore. They don't salute the flag. They don't call out stolen valor. They don't give veterans the 10% off discount at Arby's when they're trying to buy a big Montana. They don't give them that anymore. And now the USAID's out of the picture, the CIA's out of the picture, the Donald Trump's kind of cleaning this up. The respect and just the reverence that warriors and veterans deserve is coming back. And that's really important.
When there's chaos, there's opportunity. And we have the opportunity to really shift and change things as everything's in flux. When an institution is standing strong and is in power, it's hard to break their momentum. But when they crumble, you can build new institutions in their place. And as Bitcoin podcasters, as journalists, we need to be encouraging people to smoke more cigarettes. We need to be encouraging them to read Ayn Rand. We need to be encouraging them to listen to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week.
Yeah.
We need to be encouraging them to be liking and retweeting Dennis Porter's tweets. We need to be encouraging them to be having sex with their wives and to be dealing with erectile dysfunction. We need them to understand that Lynn Alden is hot. And this is the opportunity that we have before us right now.
Yeah, that one of the veterans who I have a great deal of respect for, especially. He's active on Nostr. It is Average Gary, and Average Gary is a fan. He might be listening to this, but I think I heard him on a podcast, and I might be misattributing this to Average Gary's because I respect him so much. But he said that in the Navy has the second biggest Air Force in the world, behind the U.S. Air Force. And he said that one of their mottos is that flexibility is the key to air power. And we need to be that flexibility We need to have that flexibility because, like you said, the people who are adaptable and the people who are ready to seize opportunities and to move in and take very strategic, positions, whether to orange pill or to spread the 40 hours per week mantra, that may be you. If you want to decentralize things, everything really, but especially money, and you want to separate money from state, the responsibility to be a warrior and to be a defender of your values and your freedom will ultimately rely or fall upon you. And so if you don't take up that responsibility and instead you just kind of say, well, I'm just going to leave this to be the responsibility of people who get drafted to go fight for freedom in Ukraine and Israel. That is not where, but that is where the front lines of freedom are being fought. But the lines exist everywhere. And you need to be that orange-pilled social justice warrior who doesn't tolerate shitcoins, who doesn't tolerate shitcoin behavior, and who doesn't tolerate ostensibly good Bitcoiners who blacklist good Bitcoiners like Dennis Porter.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a good point to start wrapping up the show. Let's go through the fountain boost real quick.
I did want to cover one topic really quickly before we join with this fountain boost. If you did pay attention over the weekend, a influencer named Ashley St. Clair announced that she had Elon Musk's 13th child. And then the next day, yesterday, Michelle Weekly announced that she actually had Elon Musk's 14th child, and his name is Blangley Musk. Now, I just want people to, this has been a lot of drama. There's been a lot of confusion on the timeline about these conservative female influencers who seem to not embody the values of conservatism and tradition. Like, they're not trad wives. They're really kind of more like floozies and whores who are just trying to get a rich baby daddy to pay them child support over lightning. But this is where I think some of our listeners who do have an affinity for these female, attractive, conservative influencers, the CIA and the Fed, the FBI, they have been tracking these OnlyFans and OnlyFans adjacent women the past few years who do not understand the tax law, and they don't understand how important it is to be able to afford their taxes. So they get into these situations where they can't afford their taxes and they have a big tax bill and they didn't prepare for it. And I think these feds, they work with these women to scrub the internet history of their porn activity and their less than high value past. And then they teach them how to entrap young conservative or libertarian men who like Tim Pool's podcast, Jack Posobiec, Dave Smith, the libertarian, et cetera, et cetera. And this is where some of that Fed behavior comes in on Spaces and the group chats and the DMs. It's these hot girls with these really based political conservative opinions. And you just never know which one of them's working with the feds until they can afford their taxes. She may seem interested in you, but as soon as she can afford her taxes without you, she's gone. You need a woman who cannot afford her taxes without you. And that's who you want to marry. You want her to share your politics because otherwise she can't afford her taxes. Not a girl who is able to afford her taxes independently, and then she dumps you. That's just, I wanted to go on that rant, but yeah, let's go into the fountain boost. I don't know if you had anything to add on that before we go into the boosts.
No, I think that's very well said.
Awesome. So the first one, our last episode was Super Sports Ball, the Bitcoin Pizza Day for normies, and we recorded that on the Super Bowl. I think it was a really great episode, and we got a lot of boosts. We were, I think, number 2 on the fountain charts this week as a result. And the first one is from our great friend, long-term friend of the show, Orange Mart. They boosted us 100,000 sats. So thank you very much, Orange Mart, for that huge boost. And they said, OrangeMart is all about value for value, bringing the best Bitcoin deals to our community, just like the Bugles are shining a light on the best Bitcoin podcasts. The Dual Awards will finally reveal which free podcast offers the best value for money. Couldn't agree more, OrangeMart. Value for value is super important. And I just encourage anybody with, especially like our friend Sly Goomba, who really love video games, who have time, if they can afford their taxes and they have time to play video games and they have time to learn Rust and go through Rust tutorials, we cannot recommend OrangeMart more, especially because OrangeMart, not only do they buy our t-shirts and have their characters wear them instead of being naked, they have cool, relaxing spots where you can avoid getting murdered and listen to Bitcoin podcasts, which is, that's what we're all trying to do, right? We're just trying to find time in this life to not go out, be murdered, and just listen to Bitcoin podcasts. And that's what you can do in OrangeMart. So you should check that out if you're into computer games.
I had a good time visiting OrangeMart the one time I did, or actually I visited a couple times, but one of the times I got stuck in the tutorial. You can actually skip the tutorial, fun fact. But I'd like to go back. I'm just struggling to find the resources and time to do it. But when I went, I got to ride horses with Tip NZ. I got to ride in helicopters, go on trains, listen to Bitcoin podcasts. It was a very good time. I'd highly encourage people to check it out.
Yeah, there's no better time to listen to Bitcoin podcasts than when you're riding a train, right?
They're building something cool over there, and I hope it gets more traction. And
unfortunately, they wipe all of the progress they made, all the things they've built. They wipe it clean every month, and you have to start over. But that's life. Sometimes you may be thinking you're on the right path and thinking that you are building towards something great, and it gets rugged or it just falls apart and you have to start over. And sometimes you have to start over with nothing but the clothes on your back. In OrangeMart, you don't even get to start with the clothes on your back. You have to start completely naked, and you have to find a Bitcoin podcast t-shirt to put on and wear. And then you got to find guns. You got to find a lot of things, but hopefully that they'll introduce 3D printers there so you can just 3D print a gun right away and buy a 40 hours per week Bitcoin t-shirt. So you at least cover your back and protect yourself.
Totally. Our next boost is from Late Stage Hodl for 5,000 sats, who says the only way to listen to 40 HPW is with bone conduction headphones. I don't want others to hear what I'm listening to, and I can't get your voices mainlined into my brain without doxing me by having to use my eardrums. Also, I can't get cauliflower ears, and I need to be able to overhear conversations from others on the subway or in the store if they mention something about Bitcoin. If I can't be there ready to orange pill someone when they are least expecting it, when that's the point of 40 HPW, I need to be ready to jump in immediately at the slightest mention of Bitcoin to correct them quickly and sternly if they use the word crypto.
Absolutely. This is what we were talking about just a few minutes ago. The adaptability, the flexibility to be the orange-pilled social justice warrior who demands Bitcoin-only excellence, Bitcoin-only thermodynamically sound behavior, and being able to recognize when there is somebody lacking in your vicinity and to be there to correct them and orange-pill them. That he's embodying exactly what we talked about. So thank you very much, Late Sage Hodl, for the 5,000 sats. And yes, we see that cauliflower ear on the subway. Just know that you're safe from pump and dump meme coiners that might be on your car.
Totally. I would say there's not just one strategy to listen to Bitcoin podcasts. It looks like Late Stage Hodl has found one that's successful for him, but you can do things like you can export all your podcasts onto records and play them on record players. There's endless ways to do it. So I'm glad.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad they found one that works for them.
Thank you, Late Stage Hodl. The next boost is from Sean, and he based it as 3,000 sats. He said, need some regulatory clarity regarding 40 hours per week. Is it time spent listening or hours of content consumed? For example, takes 32 hours to listen to 40 hours on 1.25x speed. This is a great question, and we have tried to be as clear about this as possible, and others in the 40 hours per week community have been sharing and debating this. But let us be very clear. It is about the hours you spent listening. So we talked about this before as well. The time preference or the time that is taking place in the Bitcoiner podcaster side is not relevant to you. Only your time is valuable. So if you listen at 1.25x and you listen to 40 hours of content in 32 hours, you are able to consume more and you're able to get ahead. It's like some people, there was this viral video, this guy who says, like, I have 3 days, my day, each 24 hours, I have 3 days in that 24 hours. I have my morning, I have my afternoon, or I do my different job on my third day. So after 24 hours, I'm already 2 days ahead of the average person. If you're listening to 40 hours of Bitcoin podcasts on 1.25x speed or higher, you are just outworking, out progressing, out growing the people who still are at a level where they need to listen to it on normal speed.
Yeah. If you're an hourly employee at a job, and you're expected to show up and work 40 hours a week, and you only work 32 hours, I don't think that's going to cut it. That's like taking a whole day off from work. It's not acceptable. But I would say 32 hours is kind of like the cutoff for full-time employees, right? If you go below that, you're not going to get benefits.
It's like if you're competing in jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai, martial arts, your success and your ability to get to the top and to excel, it relies on you. If you think that listening to 32 hours of Bitcoin podcasts at 1.25x to get to the 40 hours of total content is enough for you, I can't stop you. But just know you're only cheating yourself. You're not cheating me. You're not cheating the other people in the 40 hours per week community. You're only cheating yourself. So think about that if you're trying to cut corners.
Yeah. I'm about to piss my pants. Can you continue reading?
I'll finish this out here. We've got a few more. We got a boost from Dave. Dave, 40 hours per week in his handle. Thank you for doing that, Dave. Dave from New Zealand, 2,100 sats. The Kendrick Lamar halftime show was the greatest shitpost to Drake. Make hating great again. Couldn't agree more. It was great to see an American, even somebody who's not being paid by the CIA anymore, still kind of take that passion and turn it against the Canadians. Very similar to the hockey game that took place this weekend. We're going to cover it. We ran out of time. But the U.S. hockey team destroyed the Canadian hockey team. The Canadian hockey team, they booed the national anthem before the game, and immediately the Americans just beat the shit out of them for doing that. They're not going to tolerate that disrespect. Pay your taxes to the United States and respect the national anthem. We're not going to have a problem. If you don't, we're going to send our troops. Like I said, not all military soldiers, not all warriors wear, camouflage. Some of them wear red, white, and blue hockey uniforms, and they will slam you into the ice if you disrespect American national anthem. So thank you, Dave. Next one is from Rakan, 1,000 sats. There was no boost message there, so thank you, Rakan. The second one is from DHIK Rula. And he boosted 1,000 sats, fiat based. I do not know what he is. If he's saying that fiat is based or that something is fiat based, I'm not sure. But thank you for the boost anyways. The last two, 100 sats each from Pies. Our boy, 80 hours of Bitcoin podcasts a week. Let's fucking go. I wear AirPods 16 hours a day while I'm jackhammering. And the next one says value for value. But yeah, Pies doesn't cut corners. He's doing the proof of work, physical manual labor. And he's doing double the 40 hours per week. Pies is probably the future of the United States and the value for value economy. And it just proves that, anybody can do it if they put in the work.
Totally. Yeah, thanks for covering for me for a minute. I was about to piss my pants. Unfortunately, I was not in a location where I could piss in a bottle. There have been times on this podcast I have chosen to piss in a bottle versus stop and go to the bathroom, and that's just my commitment to Bitcoin podcasting. But I don't think the people in the location I'm recording at would really appreciate it if I did that right now.
All right. No, just think about, let's just go back to what we were talking about. Think about if you're cutting corners and listening to fewer Bitcoin podcast hours because you're listening on a faster speed, while others are pissing in a bottle to deliver you signal. Just think about that. Just think about that.
Well,
but yeah, shorter episode this week. We're busy. We're seeking regulatory clarity, and as all Bitcoin podcasters should be doing, once we find some regulatory clarity, we will share it with you. We will broadcast it to you. And that's another thing about regulatory clarity. It is decentralized. Not everybody has access. There is regulatory clarity quintillionaires, just like there are compliance quintillionaires and money quintillionaires. So tune in to the Bugle, the podcast for people who listen to 40 hours per week, and tune in for signal and for regulatory clarity. But thank you, and boost us again. Support us on Fountain, and put that 40 hours per week to good use.
Yeah, thank you for boosting us, all the XMR chat people. I see you. We're going to keep your comments private and respect your privacy as Monero users. But I see you, and I appreciate you. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will catch you next week on another episode.
Later.
What you're heading towards, running through the fire, fighting odds. The past informs all that you know, looking for the answers to feed your soul, noticing what they try to hide. A burden you carry, the call to fight. The weight of the world is on your back. You wanna shrug it off, just want some slack. If you let go, it feels like it will all fall apart, but you're searching for a fresh start, trying to catch your breath. Is there rest after death? You can't close your eyes and forget. The world needs a hard reset. Don't look back because you're almost there. The world's problems aren't your burden to bear, but responsibility lies with those who see. You have to use your brain in order to be free. The weight you carry is not yours alone. I know it's heavy, the end's unknown. Shrug your shoulders, let it come crashing down. Don't let the world's problems cause you to drown. How do you want to be remembered? What do you want to build? Do you want to see the world burn to embers and die after a life unfulfilled? Or do you want to give life all you got? Try to do something about systemic rot. Your mind is yours and yours a roulette. The world needs a hard reset. Don't look back because you're almost there. The world's problems aren't your burden to bear, but through the fatting for, running through the firefighting horse. The world's problems don't belong